Part 1. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 1. Our old Zhang family is so unlucky to have raised a loser like you. If I had known, I would have drowned you in a urine bucket. I have worked so hard to feed you and clothe you. It's a good thing for you. My son lost his hand and missed the exam because of you. Otherwise, he would have been admitted as a scholar. Now you have caused your brother to fall into the water. You evil-hearted thing, you just want to kill the whole family. If I were you, I would have killed you in a head-on collision. How can I still have the honor to live? Guang'an County, Qingshui Village. MRSCAI, the head of the Zhang family, stood in the yard with a sick 4-year-old boy in her arms early in the morning and cursed at the woodshed. And the person she insulted was not a sinister villain, but just a 5-year-old girl named Nayuniu. At this time, the little girl was lying on a pile of hay in the woodshed with her whole body burning hot and her face flushed. She closed her eyes and had no idea what was going on. A group of villagers gathered outside Zhang's house to watch the excitement, chattering and pointing at the old Zhang family. I heard from Niu's mother that this child is evil. Niu was slapped by her father the year before last, and the next day her father broke his hand and missed the scholar exam. Her family Jinbao grabbed Niu and turned to Jinbao. I had a rash all over my face, it was so painful and itchy that I was crying all the time. Her mother said that Niu was the one who caused Jinbao to fall into the water this time. That place is usually very safe, but the rocks collapsed as soon as Jinbao stepped on it. Is it really so evil? But think about it carefully. I used to wash clothes there every day where Jinbao fell into the water. It was usually very stable. Why did it collapse when Jinbao stepped on it? The Zhang family made a special trip yesterday to send Jinbao to the town hospital for treatment. They didn't care about Niu who had a high fever. They just wanted Niu to be burned to death. Granny Cai said that this would help get rid of Sang Mengxing. Aunt Lu, who had always been at odds with MRSCAI, sneered when she heard this. Listen to the Zhang family's nonsense. If Niu was really a Sangman star, the Zhang family would not have the good life they have now. In the early years, Zhang Laosan was preoccupied with the imperial examination. He sold out all the land in his family and failed to get any success in the examination. The couple had been married for 5 years and still had no son or daughter. Since bringing Niu home, Zhang Laosan picked up a ginseng on the mountain, and then he had the money to build a house, and he was admitted as a child student. His wife also got pregnant and gave birth to a big fat boy. In my opinion, this is the child is destined to be blessed and will prosper the Zhang family. We all live in the same village. Looking back carefully, it seems that the Zhang family suddenly got better when Niu came to the Zhang family and before Jinbao was born. They couldn't help but think that according to the statement, the Zhang family's long-awaited grandson Jinbao was more like a morning star than Niu. It was only after Jinbao was born that all these messy things happened in the Zhang family. Some people were even moved on the spot and said, if Niu is really blessed, whoever raises her will be able to prosper, then I. But on the spot, she was interrupted by Aunt Gu on the side. Come on, people are going to die and you are saying this, take them back and call a doctor. The man quickly shook his head and said, doctor please. My family has no money, forget it. Aunt Gu said proudly, yes, if the doctor's money is spent, the person is still alive, isn't it unlucky? If you are really lucky, you won't die now. In my opinion, is Niu's mother right? Wrong, Niu is a dead star. Just at this time, Zhang Yuniang squeezed in from the crowd. She received the news that her niece Niu had fallen into the water and had a high fever, so she rushed over with 2 eggs. After entering the house, MRSCAI stopped cursing, but her little nephew Jinbao was acting sickly. Why don't you let Niu get up? I want her to get up and bark like a dog. She's not allowed to lie down and pretend to be dead. MRSCAI hurriedly coaxed, Jinbei, be good, Nyunio is about to die. You are sick now, so don't touch her. What a bad luck. Grandma, can you imitate a dog's bark, woof woof woof. Jinbei was not happy and said, I don't want you, an old woman, it's so ugly. I want Nyunio. Mom said that from now on Nyunio will be my wife, and she wants to sleep in the same bed with me. I'll go find her right now. When MRSCAI heard this, she immediately screamed heartily, stopped her sweet grandson, and said, Grandma's heartbroken grandson, you really can't go to her. You haven't recovered from the body that fell into the water yesterday. Don't touch that bad luck, damn it. If you really want to marry me, Grandma will save money to buy you another one. After hearing this, Zhang Yun's mother suddenly became angry. She rushed in with a quick step and said, Mom, Jinbei is only 4 years old, why doesn't he understand any rules? Even if Nyunio is an adopted child, she is still his sister. We live in the countryside, why do you keep talking about the girl who lives with you? Zhang Yuniang has been living under her stepmother since she was 12 years old. Perhaps because things hurt others, she always feels particularly sorry for her daughter Niu Niu, who was adopted by her natal brother. When MRSCAI heard this, she immediately frowned and said, What are you talking about? Your brother will take the imperial examination and become a high official in the future. Your nephew can raise a house full of girls, but you. MRSCAI originally had more dirty words to scold, but when she saw the few eggs in her unpleasant stepdaughter's hand, she finally swallowed the dirty words, performed a face change in front of her, and softened her tone and said, Yun Niang, you came back to visit Jinbao, so you came right away, and why did you bring any eggs? She said she refused, but MRSCAI's hand had already been stretched out to catch the eggs. Zhang Yuniang's face turned cold, she retracted her hand holding the egg and said, I want to see Nyunio first. MRSCAI curled her lips and said, People are going to die. What's there to see? It's not bad luck. Come on, give me the eggs. It's just right. I want to make frangipani for Jinbei. Zhang Yuniang was particularly insistent on this matter. She held the egg in her hand tightly and refused to give it to her stepmother MRSCAI. Seeing that MRSCAI couldn't get the 2 eggs for a long time, she couldn't pretend anymore. She pointed directly at her nose and scolded, You are a black-hearted thing. The niece you picked up is more important than your biological nephew. How can I raise it, you're such a bastard. Zhang Yuniang has heard these curses since she was a child. She has long been used to it, and it is as if she has not heard them at this time. But Jinbei, who was only 4 years old, didn't understand the pull between adults at all. He stared at the eggs in Zhang Yuniang's hands with a pair of greedy little eyes, grabbing the corner of MRSCAI's clothes and making a fuss, I want to eat plumeria. Plumeria. Faced with her grandson's fuss, MRSCAI not only did not stop her, but instead said in a sinister tone, Jinbei is good, there's nothing I can do about it. Your aunt doesn't love you and is reluctant to give you eggs. She only thinks about that short-lived ghost. Zhang Yuniang ignored Granny Cai, put the egg in her arms, and rushed directly to the woodshed where Niu Niu lived. Granny Cai wanted to stop her, but her precious grandson Jinbei wouldn't let go, rolling on the floor and shouting for eggs. MRSCAI cursed her bad luck in her heart and blamed Zhang Yuniang for being stingy. She brought the eggs back but was reluctant to give them away, which only aroused Jinbao's greed. Jinbao's yelling made people's ears hurt. MRSCAI felt the pain for her hard-won grandson to the core. She had no choice but to say, Okay, Grandma will make you some frangipani right now, just eat one to satisfy your craving, the eggs at home still cost money. MRSCAI carried her grandson into the kitchen, took an egg out of the cabinet, knocked it into a bowl, and sprinkled some salt with her eyes. Then she picked up the water that had just been boiled and poured it on. Jinbao's eyes were dripping with tears. He turned around, looked at the cabinet, and then at the kettle on the stove. As soon as MRSCAI prepared a bowl of simple version of plumeria, Jinbao pounced on it like a hungry tiger. At this time, in the woodshed, there was a bed made of rags in a dark corner. 5-year-old Niu Niu was lying on it, her cheeks red from the heat. She heard someone coming in. She opened her eyelids with all her strength and saw a familiar figure. The little girl shouted vaguely, "Big, big, aunt." When Zhang Yuniang saw this situation, she could no longer hold back her tears and flowed out. "Niu, are you uncomfortable? My aunt will take you to see the doctor, please bear with it," Zhang Yuniang said, picking her up and walking out. After finishing making plumeria, MRSCAI hurried to the woodshed without noticing Jinbao eating plumeria behind her. When her grandma wasn't paying attention, she took out another egg from the cupboard. Her eyes fell on the boiling kettle beside her, waiting for her. "I'll make another bowl after a while." "Where are you taking this person?" Granny Cai asked sharply. Zhang Yuniang said without looking back, "You are reluctant to hire a doctor for your child, I will hire one for her." MRSCAI was so anxious that she jumped to her feet and said, "An unlucky loser deserves to die. Why should he see a doctor? I won't allow him." Zhang Yuniang ignored her, hugged him, and walked out. MRSCAI behind her was chasing so fast that she accidentally tripped when she crossed the threshold. She fell headlong to the ground and hit her head on the ground. She let out a shrill scream in pain. Before the blood stains on her face were wiped clean, she heard the sharp cry of a child coming from the kitchen. Jinbao, who was eating secretly, accidentally knocked over the hot kettle that was burning on the stove. The hot water spilled all over his body. He rolled on the ground in pain. "It's hot. It hurts." Newbie and new author, please collect. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 2. Although Zhang Yuniang heard the noise caused by MRSCAI and Jinbao behind her, she held back and did not look back. However, Third Aunt Gu was watching the excitement and did not think it was a big deal. She shouted to Zhang Yuniang, who was hurriedly running out with her child in her arms, "Yuniang, your stepmother fell, your nephew was burned, and your brother and sister-in-law are not at home. Don't worry. Run away and come back quickly." Zhang Yuniang turned her back to Aunt Gu. Originally, she had a bad relationship with her mother's family and didn't care about her stepmother and nephew at all. However, the country was governed by filial piety, and her husband had to take the imperial examination. The word filial piety was suppressed. "If she didn't care about this, I'm just afraid that my husband will be gossiped about. But if she really wanted to take care of it, she would definitely give these two people money to hire a doctor. If the money she spent was not returned, she would not even be able to spare a personal favor. For the current plan, the only way to break the situation seems to be to have a more upright person than her appear to take charge of this matter." Just when Zhang Yuniang was struggling, Niu Niu in her arms suddenly let out a warning, her face burning with pain, "It's uncomfortable." Zhang Yuniang's heart tightened, and she immediately threw away all the entanglements. She was afraid that the child would be burnt and confused, so she would leave directly without caring. Coincidentally, as soon as she took the step, two familiar figures appeared at the intersection. They were her brother Zhang Guangzong and her sister-in-law Xiao Cai. He really fell asleep and came to the pillow. Zhang Yuniang hurriedly said to him, "Mom is injured. Jinbao seems to have been burned. Go back and have a look." As soon as little Cai heard that her precious son was injured, she rushed home regardless of anything else. Zhang Guangzong, on the other hand, stared at the child in Zhang Yuniang's arms with a gloomy look, stretched out his hand to snatch it away, and asked, "Where are you taking Niu Niu?" Zhang Yuniang had to be a little tolerant towards Granny Cai, because Granny Cai was an elder and it was not easy for her to contradict her. But facing this younger brother who was no fun, she was not afraid at all. She acted like an eldest sister on the spot and said loudly, "What can I do with your daughter? Of course I want to hire a doctor for her. Is it like you? Watching people burn to death?" Zhang Guangzhou was taken aback by the eldest sister's sudden aggressiveness. However, there were too many villagers watching the excitement around him. He considered himself a scholar and it was not easy for him to quarrel with a woman in public. Zhang Yuniang stood on the moral high ground again and pointed, reprimanding, "Zhang Guangzhou, do you have any conscience? You don't even worry about your mother getting hurt. You are still a scholar." These words were quite serious, so serious that Zhang Guangzhou could not ignore them. He glared at Zhang Yuniang fiercely, and then rushed home with an aggrieved look on his face. Zhang Yuniang breathed a sigh of relief as this pile of rubbish was finally pushed out, and she hurried to the village entrance with Niu Niu in her arms, just in time to catch Uncle Niu passing by with his ox cart. "Uncle Niu, wait for me, I'm going to the town," Zhang Yuniang shouted towards the ox cart. The bullock cart stopped. It was so full that there were no empty seats left. But the aunts and daughters-in-law in the car looked anxious when they saw her holding the child, so they squeezed each other and barely made a seat available for her. After Zhang Yuniang gave Uncle Niu a copper, Uncle Niu waved his whip and the ox cart started slowly. Uncle Niu is not actually named Niu, but he is the only one in several nearby villages who drives cattle carts to carry people into the town every day, so he is called Uncle Niu. Several villages are close to each other, and there is an aunt on the ox cart who knows Yuniang. At this time, she said, "Are you Yuniang, the little daughter-in-law of the old Gu family? My husband and your mother-in-law are cousins. You can just call me cousin. You're so lucky. If the ox cart hadn't been delayed by something, the car would have left long ago and you wouldn't be able to get on." Zhang Yuniang hurriedly said, "Cousin, it's thanks to the kindness of everyone that they are willing to squeeze a place for me. Otherwise, I don't know what to do with the baby." She didn't feel how lucky she was, and she only hoped that Niu Niu in her arms could survive this difficulty. The cousin also noticed the child in her arms. Seeing the red face, she stretched out her hand to touch it and said, "Is this too hot? Don't burn the child. Is this your daughter? I remember your family. They are all sons, where is the daughter?" Zhang Yuniang explained, "She is my niece. She has a high fever. I sent her to the town to see a doctor." My cousin was a little surprised when she heard this. After all, people in the countryside live a hard life, and some poor families may not be willing to ask a doctor if their son is sick, let alone a girl, especially since this child is just her mother's niece. This child has a good life, and she has an aunt like you who cares about her. Although my cousin said this, she felt that Zhang Yuniang was too supportive of her parents' family. Although Zhang Yuniang was a country woman who never went to school, she knew the lethality of fame. She continued without any hesitation, "If her life is really good, I won't have to worry about it. This child is solid, and her younger brother is naughty." She fell into the water. She was so small that she dared to rush into the river to save others. I don't know where she got the strength to lift her brother out of the river. It took a long time for her to be fished out. Her parents don't care about their daughter at all. I'm not willing to burn such a good child alive. Now I want to send her to the town to see a doctor. Zhang Yuniang couldn't help but feel sad when she talked about this. Niu Niu was obviously trying to save her younger brother, but she was accused by MRSCAI of being the broom star. After hearing this, my cousin wiped away her tears and said, "Oh, from what you said, this kid is really a good kid. That brother and sister-in-law of yours are so cruel." Zhang Yuniang knew that telling these things was basically the same as ruining her brother's reputation. She did it on purpose. She couldn't swallow this breath. Just thinking of Nayuniu's pitiful appearance lying in the woodshed, she seemed to see herself who was sick and driven to a corner by her stepmother to wait for death, and she immediately hugged the child tighter. By the way, speaking of your brother from your mother's side, isn't that Zhang Guangzhong who picked up ginseng in the mountains a few years ago? Asked the cousin's aunt. As soon as this was said, everyone in the car instantly stretched their heads over, and even Uncle Niu, who was driving the car, pricked up his ears. A few years ago, Zhang Guangzhong's picking of 100-year-old ginseng caused a sensation in several local villages. The villagers rushed to Daking Mountain to try their luck, but all returned empty-handed. Seeing Zhang Yuniang nod, the cousin's aunt became even more excited and said, I heard that he used the money from selling ginseng to build a big house. Logically, he should not be short of money. Why didn't he save his daughter? If I had such a good daughter, I would hold her in my hands and cherish her. How could I bear to ignore her? Yes, yes, such a person can pass the examination for a Tongsheng. Facing the chattering of the crowd, Zhang Yuniang smiled bitterly at the right time. From beginning to end, she never mentioned that Nayuniu was an adopted daughter, but said, her parents only have money to eat and drink, so how could they be willing to spend money on their daughter? Everyone immediately expressed their contempt. After all, if there was no money, it would be fine. If there was money, who would be willing to watch their daughter die? Uncle Niu! Uncle Niu! Hearing this vague shout, everyone turned back and looked at the entrance of Qingshui village. They vaguely saw 3 adults holding a child standing there, but they were too far away and could not see their faces at all. Uncle Niu stopped the ox cart hesitantly and said to Zhang Yuniang, there are quite a few people from your village going to the town today. Zhang Yuniang heard the familiar voice and immediately knew that these people were her brother's family. Before she could figure out how to stop them, the people in the car were unhappy and said, Uncle Niu, look at this car, is there any room left? Why are you still carrying people? When Zhang Yuniang got on the car could still fit people, but now there is really no space at all. Uncle Niu said with a simple face, just squeeze in, and the seats will come out if you squeeze in. The hot-tempered country lady never loses anything, and she confronted him on the spot, saying, where are you squeezing? Just squeeze us all off. If you want to take more people, then return the money, I want to get off the car. Yes, if it's just one person, forget it, but there are 3 or 4 people here. I'm afraid I'll be squeezed off halfway. You want to pay if someone falls? Return the money. The people in the car talked at once, expressing all their dissatisfaction in their hearts. Uncle Niu was so annoyed by their noise that he could only helplessly say, okay, no more people. After saying that, he ignored the Zhang family members who were driving towards this place, waved his whip, and the ox cart moved towards the town. The 3 adults and 1 child in the distance were overjoyed when they saw the ox cart stopped. It takes an hour to walk from Qingshui village to the nearest town, but only half an hour to ride the ox cart. The adults were fine, but Jinbei, the child, kept shouting it hurts, and the adults were so distressed. They hurried towards the ox cart with the child in their arms, but before they took 2 steps, the ox cart suddenly moved again. The family looked at the situation and was so anxious that Zhang Guangzhong didn't even care about the politeness of a scholar. He ran and shouted, Uncle Niu, wait a minute, we haven't gotten on the car yet. But Uncle Niu acted as if he didn't hear it this time, and waved his whip a few more times under the urging of everyone. Zhang Guangzhong chased for a long time, and saw that the ox cart was running farther and farther away. He was so angry that he couldn't help but wonder if Uncle Niu, the driver, was deliberately playing tricks on him. He kicked hard on a clump of weeds on the roadside. But the next second, Zhang Guangzhong jumped up on the spot holding his right foot. He didn't see it clearly just now, and kicked on the tip of the stone hidden in the grass, and his big toe suddenly felt a piercing pain. Little Cai held Jinbei in one hand and supported Cai Posa with the other. It was very difficult to support her. She was counting on Zhang Guangzong to help, but she didn't expect that her good husband would get into trouble faster. At this time, she covered her feet and performed the golden rooster stand, her face twisted with pain. The ox cart had gone far away, and they had no other choice but to support each other and slowly walk towards the town. The place where MRSCAI's forehead was hit was still aching. She thought of the bad luck that had happened all day and felt that it was all caused by Niu. She asked viciously, "Did you find the person who brought that jinx?" Zhang Guangzong didn't say anything. He was never willing to expose himself to these dirty deeds. Little Cai replied, "Mother, my husband and I asked around. Wang Yuanwai's youngest son died yesterday. He just needs a little girl for a ghost marriage. However, he wants to see someone first and is determined to find a good-looking one for his son." MRSCAI curled her lips and said, "This girl can marry into such a good family. It's really a bargain for her. Mr. Wang is so picky. How much can he offer?" 5 taels of silver. MRSCAI was very unhappy when she heard this and scolded little Cai, "You only give so little? We spent a lot of grain to raise such a child. Didn't you bargain? I knew you were useless. You gave birth to a Jinbei after so many years of marriage, but now you can't handle such a small matter." Although little Cai was MRSCAI's niece, she didn't have a high status in this family. She swallowed her anger and explained to her mother-in-law, "This year, the weather is dry and the price of grain is high. Only our Qingshui village, which is backed by Daking Mountain, can still live. People outside can't survive. Children are sold everywhere. Living people can't be sold at a high price, let alone dead people." MRSCAI was still very dissatisfied, mumbling and blaming little Cai for not being able to do things. Little Cai turned her head and glanced at her husband, but Zhang Guangzong just limped forward, as if he had not heard these words. The ox cart drove on the rural road for half an hour and finally arrived at the town. Before getting off the cart, Zhang Yuniang habitually touched Niu's forehead, was stunned for a moment, and then grabbed her aunt's sleeve and said, "Aunt, please help me touch the child's forehead. Is the fever gone?" The aunt had also touched Niu's forehead before, and was immediately surprised, saying, "Yuniang, this child is really well behaved. The fever has gone down as soon as she arrived in the town. This is to save you money. If you really go to the clinic, I don't know how much money you will spend. New book, please collect, please click, moi. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 3. Zhang Yuniang breathed a sigh of relief. Even though she knew that going to the hospital was not cheap, she still insisted. She fell into the water yesterday and had been burning all night. I still sent her to the hospital for a checkup, otherwise I won't feel at ease. Just at this time, Niu woke up, opened her big moist eyes, and asked softly, "Aunt, is Niu going to die?" Zhang Yuniang's nose felt sour, and she couldn't help but shed tears when she looked at the little girl's pitiful appearance. Even though she had no strength in her body, Niu still tried her best to raise her thin little hand and tried to help Zhang Yuniang wipe away her tears. Niu thought she was really going to die, so she comforted her aunt and said, "Auntie, don't cry. Ya said ghosts are very powerful. When Niu dies and becomes a ghost, she will go find her second cousin and tell him to go home." Zhang Yuniang has 3 sons. The second son was kidnapped when he was a child, and he still does not know whether he is alive or dead. For such an older child, she was still thinking about her as an aunt when she was dying. Zhang Yuniang suddenly felt so soft-hearted. Don't worry, Niu, you won't die. You'll be fine once the fever goes away. Auntie won't let anything happen to you. After Zhang Yuniang said goodbye to her cousin, she carried her child into the only medical center in the town. She has been to the medical clinic many times over the years, so she is quite familiar with it. There are not many patients in the town, and there is only one old doctor sitting in the medical center. The old doctor was well known for his high medical ethics from all over the country, and he often treated Zhang Yuniang's son. After taking the pulse, he said to Zhang Yuniang, "This child is fine. He is just weak and hasn't had enough to eat. Give it to her, just get something good to replenish it, no need to prescribe medicine." However, Zhang Yuniang was still worried and asked, "Is it really okay not to take medicine after having a fever all night? I'm afraid she will be confused by the fever." The old doctor looked at Niu's big and smart eyes, picked up a straw grasshopper next to him to play with the little girl, and asked, "Little girl, do you want this grasshopper?" Niu's beautiful almond eyes showed longing, but she still shook her head and said in a sweet voice, "This is the doctor's grandfather's thing, Niu can't have it." The old doctor was immediately happy. He stuffed the grasshopper into Niu's hand and said, "You are so good, I gave it to you as a gift." Niu was at a loss with the straw grasshopper and looked to Zhang Yuniang beside her as if asking for help. When her aunt nodded, she dared to hold the straw grasshopper carefully like a treasure and said to the old doctor very seriously, "Thank you, Grandpa Doctor. I wish you the best. Grandpa will live a long life." When the little girl said this in a soft voice, the old doctor was very happy. He turned to Zhang Yuniang and said, "The little girl is smart and well behaved. I can't wait to take her home. How could I be confused? Listen to me. It's a medicine that contains 3 parts of poison. Don't take medicine unless absolutely necessary." Zhang Yuniang finally felt at ease and took out 5 copper coins to pay for the consultation. The old doctor took a look at Niu's clothes with countless patches and her sallow complexion and obvious lack of nutrition. He waved his hand directly and said, "The little girl is not sick. What kind of medical fee do you want?" Although Zhang Yuniang was poor, she felt that the medical clinic had its own rules and refused to take advantage of it. Seeing her being so stubborn, the old doctor felt helpless and said, "I accepted the little girl's blessing just now and regard it as a medical fee. If you insist on paying it, you will not see my old man live 100 years. Zhang Yuniang was stunned for a moment, then hesitantly took the money back. The old doctor gave Niu a funny look again and joked, "Hurry up and get some food for the child. I just heard my little belly growling." Niu immediately hid in Zhang Yuniang's arms in shame. Zhang Yuniang thanked her again and hurriedly carried her child out to find food. If Zhang Yuniang was alone, she could probably just buy steamed buns and flatbreads, but when she thought about Niu recovering from a serious illness, Zhang Yuniang gritted her teeth and sat down at a roadside wonton stall with her child in her arms. "Boss, a bowl of wontons." Zhang Yuniang took a look at the price, and coincidentally, it was no more, no less, exactly 5 cents. The steaming wontons came out of the pot quickly. Zhang Yuniang picked one up, blew it and fed it to Niu's mouth. Niu did not open her mouth, but raised her head and glanced at Zhang Yuniang doubtfully. "Why don't you eat?" Yuniang was very surprised. "This wonton is a time-honored restaurant with a delicious aroma. Everyone who has eaten it praises it. Yuniang can't understand why there are children who don't like to eat it." Niu shook her head, staring at Yuniang with her dark eyes, and said, "Niu doesn't want to eat. My aunt took Niu around today. It was very hard. I will eat it." A 5-year-old child could be so sensible. Not only was Yuniang not happy, but her eyes were sore. She thought of the people in her natal family, and Niu was a picked-up child. I am afraid that she had not received any kindness in that family, so she raised her into her current temperament. Yun Niang handed the chopsticks to Niu Niu's mouth again and coaxed in a warm voice, Niu Niu is good, my aunt has eaten in the morning and is not hungry at all. You have to eat well to have the strength to grow taller. But Niu Niu's little face was still full of hesitation. She saw her aunt counting 5 copper coins to the boss. In her impression, this was a lot of money. 2 years ago, her father slapped her because a copper plate on the table was missing. Although it was later discovered that her grandma had taken the money, Niu Niu still remembered the burning pain. Whatever delicious food there is at home, she always sticks to Jinbao first. She has never tasted white noodles or fresh meat. Even during the Chinese New Year, she only gave it a small piece of chicken neck to taste. "Aunt, it's too expensive. I can just eat wild vegetable porridge. I don't need to eat such good things," Niu Niu whispered. Yuniang felt sad, but still advised, "Niu Niu is sick, so you have to eat something good to nourish your body. If you don't eat well, your body will not be well maintained, and you will get sick again. At that time, aunt will spend a lot of copper coins to treat Niu Niu." Niu Niu immediately said, "Aunt, you don't have money, don't treat me, I can help you even if I die and become a ghost." Yuniang was shocked when she heard this. Because she had a bad relationship with her stepmother, she didn't like her stepmother always asking her for money, so every time she went back to her parents' home, she cried poor and said that she was too busy to handle it. But she didn't expect that Niu Niu remembered it all. She felt that she didn't treat Niu Niu very well before. She just occasionally gave Niu Niu some food and secretly helped her when she saw the child doing heavy work. But she didn't expect that the little girl actually remembered everything. This time, she brought the little girl to the town to see the doctor, and she did it on impulse, and she didn't even know how it would end. But now, seeing the child being well behaved, Zhang Yuniang secretly made a decision that such a good child must never return to the Zhang family's den of tigers and wolves. The Zhang family thought Niu Niu was unlucky and a waste of food, but she didn't mind. She would raise her in the future. This was her daughter. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 4. Zhang Yuniang suppressed the sour emotions surging in her heart and said softly, "Auntie wants Niu Niu to live well and grow up healthily. Auntie will be very sad when she thinks that she won't be able to see you grow up." When Niu Niu heard this, her face was immediately full of tangles. This feeling of not being willing to let her aunt spend money, but also not wanting her to feel uncomfortable, pulled the 5-year-old girl so hard that she could no longer turn her head. Zhang Yuniang whispered again, "Niu Niu, I can't live without my aunt. I still have a lot of copper coins." Then, while no one was watching, she glanced at Niu Niu's purse. Niu Niu couldn't help but widen her eyes when she saw a handful of copper plates and even a small piece of silver coins placed inside. The little girl had never seen so much money, but she still said, "Auntie's money belongs to Auntie, Niu Niu can't spend it randomly." Zhang Yuniang was full of tenderness, "My aunt likes Niu Niu and wants to spend money on Niu Niu." She was afraid that the little girl would continue to struggle, so she deliberately asked, "When Niu Niu grows up and can make money, can you also spend money for your aunt?" Niu Niu nodded vigorously. Zhang Yuniang reached out and touched the little girl's soft hair. "Can aunt make money by herself?" Niu Niu asked in a low voice. Zhang Yuniang looked at the little girl's silly look and thought she was so cute. She smiled and said, "Yes, aunt can earn a lot of money, buy a lot of food for Niu Niu, and raise Niu Niu to be strong." When Niu Niu heard this, her heart finally fell. The wonton in front was already cold, so Zhang Yuniang changed it to a warm one and fed it to Niu Niu. This time, the little girl finally no longer refused. After a mouthful of wontons, the little girl's eyes lit up again, and she said vaguely, "Good, good time. So is my aunt." After Zhang Yuniang also took a bite, she felt that the 5 copper coins were worth spending. No wonder everyone said that the wontons at this restaurant were delicious. After finishing the wontons, Zhang Yuniang did not leave in a hurry, but asked softly, "Can Niu be the daughter of my aunt and uncle from now on?" When Niu heard the last sentence, her big eyes were shining, and the joy in her eyes almost overflowed. But soon she looked a little disappointed and said, "My parents and grandma always say that raising Niu costs a lot of food, and Niu doesn't want to spend the food from her aunt's family." Zhang Yuniang was a little angry after hearing this. She didn't want Niu to stay in that home for a second longer. She even regretted that she didn't think of adopting Niu earlier. "Niu, you are still young, so you don't have to worry about these things. Tell your aunt if you are willing to be my aunt's daughter," Zhang Yuniang asked seriously. Niu nodded vigorously. She did not tell her aunt that when she was most uncomfortable with the fever last night, she was lying in the woodshed and made a wish to God, hoping that she would have a mother who loves her as much as her aunt. Zhang Yuniang smiled and said, "Then you will call me mother from now on." Niu immediately snuggled into Zhang Yuniang's arms and couldn't wait to shout, "Mom!" Zhang Yuniang's heart felt sour. She obviously had 3 sons and it was not her first time becoming a mother, but she still felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction when she heard the little girls cry. She had always liked Niu, but now she felt as if this child should be her daughter. As usual, Uncle Niu's ox cart returns in the evening, and Zhang Yuniang obviously can't wait until then. She has to deal with Niu's matter first, and she has to go back to discuss it with her husband's family. "Mom, I'll come down and walk by myself." "You'll be tired." On the way, Niu was afraid that Zhang Yuniang would work too hard and wanted to get down and walk by herself. But even though Zhang Yuniang's legs were sore from walking, she still insisted on carrying it on her back and said, "It's okay. Mom has plenty of strength. You are recovering from your illness, so you need to rest more." Niu had nothing to do with her, so she could only hope silently in her heart that it would be great if she could ride in an ox cart. Strangely enough, Zhang Yuniang had only taken 2 steps when she heard movement behind her. When she looked back, she saw Uncle Niu running over with an empty ox cart. Zhang Yuniang handed over a copper plate and got into the car, and asked in confusion, "Uncle Niu? Why do you have to go home so early?" Uncle Niu said with a gloomy look on his face, "The goods I brought for someone were left at home. The people in the town are in a hurry. They have to deliver them today. If they are delivered tomorrow, they won't be paid." However, Zhang Yuniang looked dazed and looked down at Niu, who was well behaved in her arms. Just catching up with the bullock cart was not enough to convince Zhang Yuniang that she was lucky today, but thinking about Niu's fever that went away when she entered the city, the free medical treatment, and the bullock cart that fell on her when she felt tired on the way back, she seemed to have good luck. Too much. Zhang Yuniang thought that the old people in the village secretly said that Niu was lucky, and she became more and more convinced of this statement. The bullock cart entered Qingshui village and put Zhang Yun and her daughter down. Zhang Yuniang felt anxious and took the little girl into Gu's house on the left side of the village entrance. The Gu family is still headed by Mrs. Gu. Father Gu is getting older and his brain is a little bad now. Sometimes he is sober, sometimes he is confused, and sometimes he doesn't even recognize his family members. Gu Taitong gave birth to 3 sons and 1 daughter. The eldest, Gu Mingzhu, and his daughter-in-law, Chen Chunyua, gave birth to 2 sons and 1 daughter. The second, Gu Mingda, was the husband of Zhang Yuniang, and the couple gave birth to 3 sons. The third, Gu Mingli, and his daughter-in-law, Lu Erni, gave birth to 3 sons. They have 1 son and 1 daughter. The youngest daughter of the old couple died before she grew up. Nowadays, the entire Lao Gu family has not been divided, and there are 15 people living there. After Zhang Yuniang finished talking about her plan to adopt Niu, her sister-in-law Chen Chunyua jumped up in anxiety and shouted, "Oh my God, there are so many people in the family who can't even eat, and you still have to pretend to be a big boss outside and fight for it. I don't agree with raising a girl who can't be beaten. Mrsku ignored the eldest daughter-in-law's shouting. She had already listened to the cause and effect in the village. At this time, she looked at Zhang Yuniang's husband Gu Mingde with a calm face. Second brother, is it your wife's idea to adopt this child, or is it yours idea? Zhang Yuniang immediately looked at her husband Gu Mingde with expectant eyes. Gu Mingde gave his wife a gentle look, nodded gently, and turned to Mrsku and said, "Mom, this child has a miserable life in the Zhang family. He had a fever all night last night and almost lost his life. Adopting her is both Yun Niang's idea and my idea." After hearing this, Mrsku looked hesitant. Chen Shanhua knew that her mother-in-law always listened to her second brother's words, so she hurriedly said, "Mom, raising a child is no small matter, and this is no ordinary child. I heard from the Zhang family that this girl is an unlucky plague god, full of bad luck." When Nayuniu heard this, tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't dare to refute. She looked so pitiful. Zhang Yuniang immediately protected her child behind her and said, "Sister-in-law, don't listen to the nonsense of my family. My Nayuniu is obviously a lucky girl, and she is not unlucky at all." Chen Shanhua curled her lips and said, "She is not unlucky. How come the Zhang family was so miserable by her? Mom, my second brother will take part in the scholar examination again this year. Don't be like Zhang Guangzong, who broke his hand before the exam." When Mrsku heard this, her expression suddenly changed. Among her three sons, only Gu Mingde was a scholar. Obviously the teachers said that he was very knowledgeable and would definitely be admitted as a scholar, but he always had something unexpected happen before every exam, either from cold or diarrhea, or from oversleeping and being unable to enter the examination room. He didn't pass the exam until he was 25. When it came time to take the scholar exam, Gu Mingde also encountered various unlucky things, such as sitting in a bad position, raining and getting the paper wet, and sitting in the toilet seat and being suffocated by the stench during the exam. He can meet them all. Yun Niang, this child should be sent back to Zhang. Before Mrsku could say anything, Dad Gu, who had been sitting silently next to her, suddenly started to move, stood up, stared at Niu Niu with a pair of cloudy eyes, and shouted vaguely, "Nanny." Mrsku's expression changed instantly. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 5. "What did you say, old man?" asked the old lady Gu loudly. The old man Gu, who had been confused for a long time, had always had a problem of slurred speech, but this time he spoke very clearly, "Nanan, my Nanan." The expressions of the three brothers of the Gu family also became strange. Obviously, they were not unfamiliar with this name. Nanan was the youngest daughter of the old couple of the Gu family who died young. The old couple loved this daughter very much at that time, but unfortunately, the child died of illness when she was 5 years old. Chen Shanhua came in early and knew something vaguely. She immediately said, "Mom, Dad has recognized the wrong person. Dad has been confused for a long time. Don't listen to him. This is not." The old lady Gu waved her hand to interrupt her and said, "Old wife, it is not your turn to be the head of this family yet." Chen Shanhua had to shut up. Old lady Gu turned to look at Nayuniu, who was hiding behind Zhang Yuniang, and said, "Let this child come over so I can take a good look at her." Zhang Yuniang looked at her husband in confusion. Gu Mingden nodded to her and squatted down, saying to Nayuniu in a gentle voice, "Nayuniu, be good, let's go over and let grandma take a good look at you." Nayuniu nodded obediently. Her uncle was her aunt's husband and had always been very kind to her. Although Grandma Gu looked very fierce, she still plucked up the courage to walk over with her short legs for her aunt and uncle. Old Lady Gu never liked the Zhang family and rarely looked at other people's children carefully. When Nayuniu came to her, Her old eyes stared at the little girl. She stretched out her trembling right hand and gently pushed the broken hair on both sides of the little girl's forehead to one side. The 5-year-old child did not have the baby fat of ordinary children because of long-term lack of nutrition. Instead, she looked very dry because of the lack of flesh on her cheeks, and her face was also extremely unhealthy and pale. To be honest, Mrsku didn't see how much the child looked like her daughter. She thought about it, and rolled up the sleeve of Niu Niu's left hand. After looking around, she was sure that it was empty, and she was immediately disappointed. Niu Niu didn't know what Mrsku wanted to do, and thought that her grandmother wanted to see her arm, so she took the initiative to roll up the sleeve of her right clothes. Mrsku just took a casual look, and immediately grabbed the girl's right arm, stroking the light red birthmark on it with trembling fingers. "It's Nanan, my Nanan." Mrsku took the child into her arms and hugged her tightly. Niu Niu was shocked by the sudden hug, but she still coaxed her sensibly, "Grandma, don't cry, Niu Niu is good." As the head of the Gu family, Mrsku has always been vigorous and capable. No one in the family can remember the last time she saw her cry. Old Mrsku seemed to know that she had lost her composure. After wiping her tears, she finally calmed down, but she still held Niuniu's hand tightly. "This child will stay in the Gu family from now on," old Mrsku said. Chen Chanhua wanted to say something, but was stopped by her husband. Niuniu looked at Zhang Yuniang stupidly and asked, "Mom, have I really become the daughter of you and your uncle?" Zhang Yuniang smiled and nodded. Niuniu immediately cheered. The joy in the house did not last long, and suddenly there was a shouting and cursing from Mrscai outside the house. "I am so unlucky that I raised a daughter like you who betrayed my family. Zhang Yuniang, get out of here." Outside the gate of the old Gu family's yard, many villagers who were watching the excitement had gathered as Mrscai was making a fuss. The moment Niuniu heard Mrscai's voice, she was frightened and trembled. Before Zhang Yuniang opened her mouth, old lady Gu spoke, "Don't be afraid, Niuniu, mother, grandma will protect you. Grandma will go out and chase the bad guys away." The kindness in old lady Gu's eyes almost overflowed. She stopped Zhang Yuniang who wanted to go out and said, "Niuniu is still young, you stay in the house with her, I will go to meet your stepmother." Old lady Gu called her 3 sons and the other 2 daughters-in-law to go out together. Cai Pose brought her daughter-in-law Xiao Cai to challenge, while her own son Zhang Guangzong shrank in the crowd to peek, as if he didn't want to affect his image as a scholar. When the grand battle on the side of old lady Gu was revealed, Cai Pose couldn't help but be a little scared at first, but she felt that she was right, and said with her neck stiff, "Give my granddaughter back, Niuniu is my family, why do you occupy her?" Most women in the countryside have fierce personalities, and the old women who are older have no scruples. Old lady Gu cursed back on the spot, saying, "Bah! Your granddaughter? You didn't care that your granddaughter was dying of a high fever, and you still dared to say that she was your granddaughter. From now on, Niuniu will be my child." When Mrscai heard this, she sat on the ground on the spot, slapped her thigh and shouted, "The child was robbed. The child was robbed by Gu Tongshen's family. Such a morally corrupt family actually wants to take the imperial examination." Gu Mingda and Zhang Guangzong are the only 2 young people in the village who took the imperial examination. They have been compared with each other by the villagers over the years. Gu Mingda was unlucky in the examination, but he was recognized as a good student. As for Zhang Guangzong, everyone thought that he was lucky to pass the examination. Zhang Guangzong and Mrscai, mother and son, have been holding back their anger for many years, wanting to suppress Gu Mingda. They have long been eager to drag Gu Mingda down, hoping that he will not be able to take the imperial examination again. Gu Mingda stopped the old lady Gu who was about to curse, and deliberately said to Mrscai, "Niuniu had a high fever all night, which is difficult to treat. The doctor said that she will only live for 2 days. You want to take her back? Have you prepared the coffin? Hearing this, Mrsgu immediately turned her head and wanted to ask her son why he cursed Nyuneo to death, but she still held it back. Although she was fierce, she did not have the habit of tearing her son down in public. When Mrscai heard this, she said viciously, "I don't care whether she is dead or alive. Anyway, she was picked up by my son. Even if she is dead, the body belongs to my family." Gu Mingda keenly extracted the key point of Granny Cai's words, corpse. He continued to test and said, "My family is willing to pay for the coffin, as long as the child is buried in my family's ancestral grave in the future." Mrscai said without even thinking, "Who wants you to pretend to be kind? Someone has paid for this child's coffin." Gu Mingda immediately asked, "Who will come out?" Mrscai said, "Master YuanY." "Why did Mr. YuanY pay for Niu Niu's coffin?" Gu Mingda asked again. Zhang Guangzong hid in the crowd and heard that the words were wrong, and wanted to grab Granny Cai, but because he was too far away, he had no time to warn her. Granny Cai had already said, "Of course it's because Nyuneo and his son are getting married in the underworld." The villagers suddenly let out a long exclamation. Gu Mingda added, "If you can agree to marry Yuan's wife, you must be given a lot of money." Granny Cai said, "Since you still don't know how to deal with it, so hand him over quickly." Gu Mingda said, "Nyuneo's fever has subsided, do you still want to send her to a ghost marriage?" Mrscai's mouth was still so quick, "Of course, our Zhang family is not willing to raise a sick child." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 6. When Gu Mingda heard this, he said, "So, you have to kill even a living person. This ghost marriage must be matched, right?" Granny Cai opened her mouth to respond, but this time Zhang Guangzong suddenly jumped over. He always regarded himself as a scholar and was not willing to deal with the villagers. When he saw that my mother was trying to trick her, he ran out. "Gu Mingda, please stop trying to trick my mother. Don't talk about whether she has these things or not. Return my daughter to me now," Zhang Guangzong said fiercely. Gu Mingda and Zhang Yuniang are worthy of being a couple. When facing Zhang Guangzong, each one made a bigger statement than the other and said, "Don't even call me brother-in-law. Is this the rule for you scholars?" Zhang Guangzong was so angry that he wanted to say that Gu Mingda didn't call Mrscai just now, but times had changed, and now it seemed like he was being petty to settle old scores. Gu Mingda narrowed his eyes and saw that he still didn't call anyone, so he said, "Are you not going to recognize me as a relative? Well, I will tell others later that you and I have nothing to do with each other, and you don't have to do it anymore. It's so hard to prove to others that you are my brother-in-law." Zhang Guangzong looked at Gu Mingda in disbelief after hearing this. Zhang Guangzong has always disliked Gu Mingda. They were both scholars, but they were all just children and none of them were admitted as scholars. However, his and Gu Mingda's popularity in the circle of scholars in Guang'an County was very different. Gu Mingda has become a guest of the county's lecturers and has a wide circle of friends among scholars. In contrast, Zhang Guangzong is like an unpleasant mouse. Others always point out his small mistakes and keep mentioning them. His classmates reject him. If it weren't for his status as Gu Mingda's brother-in-law, he would have no chance. Several scholars were willing to pay attention to him. Zhang Guangzong always thought that he was hiding well and felt that Gu Mingda didn't know that he was showing off outside under the name of his brother-in-law. He didn't expect that Gu Mingda knew everything, but he never mentioned it. At this time, when Gu Mingda said this, it was no different from directly poking Zhang Guangzong's aorta. He wished he could find a crack in the ground and crawl in on the spot. Zhang Guangzhong would not blame himself. He cursed Gu Mingde in his heart for being a hypocrite and deliberately watching his jokes. But no matter how angry he was, Zhang Guangzhong still had to bow his head to Gu Mingde and shout, "Brother-in-law," in order to be able to eat well in the local area. After Gu Mingde responded, his brother-in-law held his head even more clearly, and continued to point out from the moral high ground, saying, "Although you and Yun Niang are not born from the same mother, they are still biological siblings. Although Yun Niang's you have learned nothing about noble moral character, but as your brother-in-law, I can also be regarded as your elder brother. You should also understand that an elder brother is like a father. There are some rules that I have to teach you." Zhang Guangzhong couldn't help clenching his fists after hearing these words. At this time, Zhang Yuniang, the wife who Gu Mingde said was of high moral character, was holding Niu Niu in her arms and peering out of the door to see the excitement. Seeing her husband quelling all the arrogance of his younger brother with a series of beatings, Zhang Yuniang couldn't help but smile. "Got up." Niu Niu's eyes were shining brightly and she said, "Mom, the new father is so awesome." The old father didn't dare to say a word in front of him. Zhang Yuniang gently touched the top of Niu Niu's soft hair and said, "When you meet your old father in the future, you can call me uncle directly. Do you understand?" Seeing her husband's attitude, Zhang Yuniang understood that it was almost certain that Niu Niu would become her daughter. In the yard, Gu Mingde continued to teach his brother-in-law as the eldest brother, "The family has no money for medical treatment and can only watch my daughter die, and deliberately waiting for my daughter to die of illness to get married. These are two different things. If we really want to make a fuss, do you think is there anyone else willing to take the college exam with you?" When Zhang Guangzhong heard this, he glanced at his biological mother, Granny Cai, with hatred. If she hadn't been lax in her words, no one would have known that he sold his daughter into a ghost marriage. His biggest obsession in life is to be admitted as a scholar in the imperial examination, so that those who look down on him can see that Zhang Guangzhong is much better than Gu Mingde. To be admitted as a scholar, you must pass the college examination. In addition to having a local student as a guarantor, you must also sign bonds with 4 children to ensure that the other party will not commit fraud. Gu Mingde's threat was not a lie. Scholars are the noblest people. If word spread that Zhang Guangzhong forced his daughter to death just to get married, no one would be willing to enter into a guarantee with him. He would really not be able to take the college examination and become a scholar. A hint of guilt flashed across Zhang Guangzhong's face at this time, but he was not willing to give up his daughter to the Gu family just like that, so he could only say harshly, "I will raise my daughter by myself and will not go to other families. What my mother just said nonsense, I have no intention of getting her married." Gu Mingde also knew that he would not bow his head so easily. Mrscai only said that she sold it to a member of staff, but did not say to whom. Gu Mingde thought for a moment, then took 2 steps towards Zhang Guangzhong, leaned into his ear and whispered, "Which family member did you originally plan to sell the child to?" "Yuan Wang's family, right." Zhang Guangzhong was shocked when he heard this. He didn't expect that Gu Mingde could guess this. The reason Gu Mingde guessed was quite simple. He happened to hear that Wang Yuan's wife's youngest son was gone. The child was not much different in age from Niu Niu. It was already difficult for ordinary people to survive, and they would not be willing to spend money to support their son. Yin marriage. Gu Mingde continued, "Based on my understanding of Wang Yuan, he won't be willing to pay too high a price, about 5 taels of silver, right?" Previously, it could be said that a blind cat encountered a dead mouse. This time, Zhang Guangzhong was really scared and sweating profusely. Although he had long known that Gu Mingde was extraordinary, after being a relative for so many years, he had no idea that Gu Mingde was a living god. "You can guess everything." Gu Mingde looked at his reaction and knew that he had guessed correctly. A healthy girl of Niu Niu's age would cost about 7 or 8 taels of silver. Wang Yuanwei would not offer a higher price than this. If the price was too low, the Zhang family would not be so eager. He guessed it casually and it was right. Gu Mingde also knew that he could not push people too hard. Although the Zhang family were not good people, they had raised a child to the age of 5. If they did not give them anything, then it would be their Gu family who would be criticized. I will pay 6 taels of silver, and Niu Niu will be adopted by our family. Gu Mingde offered a price that Zhang Guangzhou could not refuse on the spot. Zhang Guangzhou was tempted to see that he did not have to bear the bad reputation of ghost marriage and could get 1 tael more than ghost marriage. But he had always regarded Gu Mingde as his rival. He felt a sense of frustration in his heart when he let his rival achieve his wish so easily. No, Niu Niu is a child I picked up from the river. I have watched her grow up and raised her with great effort. I really can't bear to give her to you. Zhang Guangzhou tried to force Gu Mingde to raise the price in this way. He also wanted to see Gu Mingde's face. But Gu Mingde knew his tricks very well and bargained in the opposite direction. 5 taels of silver, if you bargain once more, I will lower the price once more. Gu Mingde's attitude was very clear. He wanted to adopt the child and he would never indulge Zhang Guangzhou's bad habits. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 7. Gu Mingde's words really pinched Zhang Guangzhou hard. He even regretted why he shouldn't have come down when he had only 6 taels of silver. Now he paused on the spot and thought of countless thoughts in his mind. He could indeed refuse this adoption. But what good would it do to bring back a sick girl? I can't even do housework, so keeping it is a pure negative equity. If Niu Niu dies after returning, whether from illness or being killed by them, the only way to recover the loss is through a ghost marriage. But as long as this is done, Gu Mingde will spread rumors out of revenge that Niu Niu was harmed by him. Dead. Although Zhang Guangzhou felt aggrieved by being plotted, he finally said, "Okay, 5 taels is 5 taels." Gu Mingde nodded, took out pen, ink, paper and inkstone, and wrote an adoption document on the spot, in which all the causes and consequences were clearly written. Zhang Guangzhou saw that he had prepared so thoroughly without leaving any loopholes, so he could only reluctantly sign and fingerprint. From the beginning, Gu Mingde had no intention of defaulting on the debt. His original plan was to pay the same amount as the ghost marriage to completely resolve the matter. Only in this way can their Gu family get rid of the bad reputation of robbing children. Mrscai was not as upset as her son. When she saw the white money, she immediately laughed so hard that she couldn't see her teeth. Before leaving, she did not forget to remind the Gu family with her kindness, "I rushed to spend money to buy a broomstick and go back. There will be more in the future. You are out of luck." Her words of provocation were met with the response that Mrs. Gu chased her with a broom and drove her out. But when the Gu family closed the door, sister-in-law Chen Chunyua, who was listening to Niu Niu, opened her mouth and said, "Mom, my second brother has quite a lot of money. If you want to buy a broomstick, just buy it." Before she finished speaking, she was given a sharp look by Mrs. Gu. "Who are you talking about? Who are you talking about? Since Niu Niu has come to my house, she is our Gu family. Forget what outsiders say, our own family. You have the nerve to say that? You don't have to make people laugh." Mrs. Gu looked at Niu Niu, who felt uncomfortable hearing the word broom star, and comforted, "Niu Niu, be good, don't listen to your aunt's nonsense. You are not a broom star. You belong to this family, granddaughter, do you remember?" In order to comfort the frightened little girl, Mrs. Gu, who always looked fierce, forced out a smile. But this smile looked uglier than crying. Combined with the dim light in the room, it was enough to scare the child into tears. Gu Xiaobao, who was only 3 years old, was so frightened that he burst into tears. Mrs. Gu's eyelids immediately drooped. Niu Niu, on the other hand, didn't seem to be afraid at all. Instead, She took the initiative to walk up to Mrs. Gu, held her grandma's hand, and said obediently, "Grandma, I remember." Mrs. Gu's cold face suddenly softened. She squeezed the little girl's hand, thinking that the girl was still considerate, and looked at the still crying grandson with disgust. Mrs. Gu was a well-known fierce woman in the village, but Niu Niu didn't think she was fierce at all. Niu Niu thought to herself, it turns out there are grandmothers who don't scold their granddaughters. Grandma Gu is the best grandma in the world. After Chen Chunyua was scolded by Mrs. Gu, she didn't dare to mention the word broom star again, but she still couldn't swallow the thought of buying an outsider for 5 taels of silver. Second uncle has been studying all these years and has rarely taken care of family affairs. He has spent a lot of money. Now I don't know where he got so much money. Chen Chunyua still mentioned the 5 taels of silver in her words. Mrs. Gu glared and said, "Did I waste your money? Why do you talk so much all day long?" Chen Chunyua said, "My mother is still in charge of the house now, but my second brother has hidden his private wealth. He doesn't care about your hardships, mother." Mrs. Gu said directly, "Speaking of hiding private money, who doesn't know about the few taels of silver you hide in the corner of your own house?" Chen Chunyua's biggest secret was exposed on the spot. She was so anxious that she glanced around. She faced the curious eyes of the whole family and explained in a stuttering voice, "I don't have any money hidden in the corner." "Mom, you must have remembered it wrong." Mrs. Gu sneered. Chen Chunyua couldn't say anything else and glanced at her third sibling Lu Ernie. Lu Ernie laughed at her sister-in-law's low fighting ability in her heart, but she and her sister-in-law had similar ideas. Neither of them was happy with having more people in the family. She said, "Mom, sister-in-law doesn't have any other intentions. It's just that the family is not well off now, and it's hard enough to feed so many children. It would be fine if it was my own biological child, but there is no blood relationship. If one more person eats, the rest of the family will have to eat less. This seems unfair to our 3-bedroom family." Before Mrs. Gu could speak, Gu Mingda suddenly said, "Mom, since the eldest brother and the third brother are so dissatisfied, why not separate the families? It is human nature for a tree to divide its roots." Hearing this, everyone in the third room of the big house suddenly panicked. Mrs. Gu also glanced at her second son disapprovingly, "Don't talk nonsense, I'm not dead yet." Gu Laota and Gu Lao-san no longer pretended to be deaf and dumb, and said to Gu Mingda, "Second brother/second brother, you misunderstood. We really have no intention of dividing our family." Gu Mingda looked at them with a half smile but said, "Really? The first day my daughter came into this family, the elder sister-in-law and the third younger sister couldn't stand her. I thought this was what the elder brother and the third younger brother meant." Gu Laota and Gu Lao-san were indeed a little guilty after hearing this. Mrs. Gu didn't want any discord to arise between her 3 sons, so she said to Gu Mingda, "Second brother, please don't say anything like this that hurts the brotherhood." She turned to scold the other 2 sons and said, "In the early years, my family was frugal and sent you 3 brothers to study. You 2 are not enlightened." Only the second son persisted. It is obvious that he failed to live up to his expectations. "Now let the family. Why are you saying such nasty things?" Gu Boss and Gu Lao-san lowered their heads in shame. Mrs. Gu added, "The second brother spent money from the family before, but he has paid it back many times over. It is true that he did not go to the fields to do farm work like you, but he did not pay less money to the family. This money is enough. It's not enough to feed their family, you know it. This is the reason why Boss Gu and Boss Gu are reluctant to split up." Gu Mingda is an unusual scholar. Although he is just a child and has no fame yet, he has a quick mind and is not short of money. Ever since Gu Mingda paid money to his family, the family's life has obviously improved. What Chen Chunyua said about her family has no food to eat is pure nonsense. In the whole village, no one lives a better life than the old Gu family. Although they are a big family, they can still eat one meal of meat every month. An old man like Father Gu, who is confused and unable to work, would have been secretly thrown away in other people's homes and abandoned like a burden. However, in the Gu family, he can be well fed and fed. This is enough. This shows how well off the Gu family is now. Gu Boss and Gu Lao-san almost had their heads pressed by their mother, and they apologized to Gu Mingda together. Although they sincerely realize their mistakes, they still feel uncomfortable. Gu Mingda has always understood people's hearts, and said to Gu Boss and Gu Lao-san, "Brother, third brother, I have something to do in the county tomorrow. It is inevitable that one person will be too busy. After thinking about it, only my brothers can be relied on. I have to trouble you to accompany me on this trip again." When Gu Lao-san and Gu Lao-san heard this, their eyes lit up. Every time they accompanied Gu Mingda to the county, no matter what they were doing, they always had a drink, and this time it must be the same. When Gu Mingda saw that they had agreed, the corners of his mouth curled up. The conflicts between men could be resolved with just one drink. Mrs. Gu sighed watching this scene, secretly thinking that it was not that she favored Gu Mingda, but that the second son was so skillful. If the eldest and third son offended him, it would be really bad luck. The happiest person in the room is actually Niu Niu. She doesn't understand the pull between adults, and her heart and eyes are full of joy. Niu Niu is finally no longer a child who is disliked by her family. What a wonderful new parents and new grandma. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 8. There are many people in the Gu family, and they sat at two tables for dinner. Men sat at one table with men, and women sat at another table with women. Niu sat obediently beside Zhang Yuniang. Although she was very hungry, she still knew the rules when she saw a table full of food. She was completely different from her other two cousins, Gu Dia and Gu Xiaoa, who wanted to pounce on the food. Old Lady Gu was very satisfied with Niu's performance and nodded. "Grandma, aren't you going to eat yet?" "I'm so hungry." Gu Dia covered her stomach and acted like a spoiled child to Old Lady Gu. Old Lady Gu glared at her and said, "You're so old, but you only know how to eat. You don't know the rules at all." Gu Dia was scolded, but she didn't feel embarrassed. She still urged Old Lady Gu to distribute the food quickly. Old Lady Gu didn't torture anyone anymore. She picked up the big rice bowl and distributed the coarse grains in it according to the number of people. There were not many dishes on the table, one plate of fried radish and one plate of boiled wild vegetables. The fried radish and boiled wild vegetables obviously didn't have too much oil, and they looked wilted, without the luster that food should have. Even so, this was still a rare good meal for Niu. After all, when she was at the Zhang family, she couldn't even get tender wild vegetables, and could only eat the old wild vegetable stems that most people couldn't chew. The number of grains of coarse rice in the bowl could be counted. Gu Dia couldn't help complaining, "I haven't eaten meat for more than 10 days, and I haven't even eaten an egg." Old Lady Gu immediately looked at Chen Chunyua, the mother of the Gu family. "You are going to teach your daughter to be a young lady. What are the conditions of our family? We eat meat and eggs at every turn. We should be like other families and only give our daughter half a bowl." Chen Chunyua smiled embarrassedly when she heard this. The Gu family is different from other families. In the environment where the whole village values boys over girls, Old Lady Gu has not been affected by this bad habit at all. Although she can't treat her grandchildren equally, she won't starve her granddaughter and only give her grandchildren food. "Mom, how about you fry an egg tonight? We haven't had meat in our house for a long time," Chen Chunyua said shamelessly. Old Mrs. Gu glared at her fiercely and said, "You are so beautiful." Chen Chunyua didn't say anything else, but she noticed that Niu stretched out her chopsticks and was about to pick up a chopstick of fried radish, and immediately coughed lightly. When Niu looked up, She saw the stern eyes of the ant who didn't like her, and she was so scared that her chopsticks shrank back and she didn't dare to pick up any more food. Na Yuniu had just come to this family, and Zhang Yuniang had always been paying attention to the child's movements. Seeing this situation, she picked up a chopstick of fried radish and put it into Na Yuniu's bowl as if she didn't see the murderous look of the eldest sister-in-law. Is it enough? If not, mother will pick it up for you. While speaking, Zhang Yuniang picked up a large chopstick of boiled wild vegetables and put it into Na Yuniu's bowl. Chen Chanhua was unhappy and said, "Second sister-in-law, how old is Na Yuniu? Can she finish so much? Don't waste it." In rural areas, wasting food is the most taboo. The others at the table immediately looked at Na Yuniu. But Na Yuniu is so young, and she wanted to bury her face in the bowl when eating. She has a small face, but she uses chopsticks quickly, so fast that after images can appear. She is obviously wolfing down, but her eating appearance is very beautiful, like a painting. After a while, she finished a bowl of coarse grains that is bigger than her face. "My dear, there is a glutton in our family," Chen Chanhua said sarcastically. Na Yuniu lowered her head in shame. Although she is thin, her appetite has always been larger than that of ordinary people. When she was in Zhang's house, not to mention eating with an open stomach, she was occasionally so hungry that she chewed grass. If she was seen by the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law of the Zhang family, she would have a good scolding. It's a blessing to be able to eat. My Niu Niu is well fed. Only in this way can she keep her body strong and mother can rest assured. Zhang Yuniang smiled and patted Niu Niu's shoulder. Niu Niu immediately raised her head when she heard it. She looked carefully at Zhang Yuniang's eyes and did not see any disdain in her eyes. She was relieved immediately. But she still clenched her fist and said, "Mother, I will try to eat less in the future. I can make fire, go up the mountain to collect firewood, cut pig grass, and wash clothes. You can leave these tasks to me in the future." Niu Niu is only 5 years old, but she has formed simple values. She has no thoughts of being cunning and sly. Zhang Yuniang was sad to see that although rural girls can help their families with farm work at an early age, few 5-year-olds can do so many things. Zhang Yuniang did not refuse, but said, "Okay, mother is waiting for Niu Niu to help." Niu Niu saw that she was useful in this family, and she immediately grinned. Zhang Yuniang asked again, "Are you full?" Na Yuniu fell silent when she heard this. She didn't want to deceive her adoptive mother, but she was only half full. "If you haven't eaten, add more. Our Gu family is not the kind of family that can't afford food." Old Mrs. Gu added a large spoonful of coarse grains to Na Yuniu's bowl with a cold face. Na Yuniu was flattered and said with a smile, "Thank you, Grandma." Old Mrs. Gu saw that Na Yuniu finally smiled at her, and a barely perceptible smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. The men's table was not so dramatic. They finished eating and cleaned up the table quickly. Na Yuniu carefully observed the situation in the Gu family. It was really different from when she was in the Zhang family. The men in the Gu family all do housework. After they finish their own table, they will come to help the women. Zhang Guangzong always waited for Xiao Cai to clean up. He waited for others to serve him when he ate. He was lying all day at home and didn't do any housework. Gu Mingda saw the little girl's puzzled look, which looked so cute, so he couldn't help it and pinched her soft little face. "Yuniang, bring Na Yuniu with you later," Gu Mingda warned. Niu Niu was confused. After the kitchen was tidied up and the Gu family had no other work to do, Na Yuniu finally knew what to do. In a corner of the yard, there were several small sand tables placed on the ground. The boys in the first and third rooms all had sad faces. "Second uncle, I just want to farm, I don't want to study," Gu Yun, the grandson of Gu's eldest son, said. Gu Mingda also had a headache. His eyes passed over his nephew Gu Yun and landed on Boss Gu, who was not far away. The father and son looked exactly the same, and their temperament was also very real. Another nephew, Gu Jin, also said quickly, "Second uncle, I don't want to learn either, so please don't embarrass me." Even though Gu Mingde was very smart, he couldn't do anything when he met these two nephews who were tired of studying. Boss Gu, on the other hand, came over with a stick and scolded, "You two useless things, your second uncle taught me with good intentions, but you don't appreciate it." The two brothers, Gu Yun and Gu Jin, didn't look very smart, but they were very good at dealing with their own father. "Is it our fault that we don't like reading? We just followed your roots." "Yes, if reading was really that easy, why don't you read, Dad?" The two brothers sang in harmony and helped Boss Gu stand up. The grandchildren of the Gu family have not been sent to private schools. They have always adopted an economical method. They are taught by the only scholar Gu Mingde. Nowadays, this scene of discord between father and son has been played out many times in the old Gu family, and Gu Mingde has long been used to it. If his nephews were willing to learn, he would teach them more. If their nephews were unwilling to learn, he would watch them get beaten. Although brothers Gu Yun and Gu Jin had strong mouths, Gu Gu's stick was even more powerful. After beating the two brothers severely, the two brothers were almost forced to sit in front of the sand table. Gu Mingde picked up a piece of paper and wrote the word 11 on it with a pen. When the brothers Gu Yun and Gu Jin saw such complicated words, their faces suddenly wrinkled. It was Gu Mingde's biological son, 13-year-old Gu Yan, who immediately looked at Niu Niu. Niu Niu still didn't know what this word meant to her. She just tilted her little head and looked at the piece of paper strangely, thinking to herself, "Is this the legendary word recognition?" In the Zhang family, even if Niu Niu couldn't read, she would probably be beaten even if she touched Zhang Guangzong's books. Gu Mingde said to Niu Niu, "This character is pronounced Zixi, and the morning sun welcomes guests and brightens the hill. It means that the road to the future is like the rising sun, bright and bright. You must remember that your name is Gu 11. For Gu Mingde's generation, the names were sorted as Ming, and for Gu Yun's generation, the names were sorted as." Apparently, Gu Mingde gave this title to his adopted daughter without consulting his family. It was just a name for their daughter's family, and Gu Lao and Gu Lao Yi are both looked indifferent. Chen Chanhua and Lu Erni are both illiterate and have no idea how special this word is, but they are the kind of people who feel as uncomfortable as crawling ants if they don't take advantage of it. Chen Chanhua directly pushed her daughter Dia forward and said with a dry smile, "Her second uncle, you can't just name Niu. My Dia is also your niece." Lu Erni also pushed her daughter Xiao in front of Gu Mingde. Her intention was obvious. Gu Mingde didn't refuse and named the two children Gu Qing and Gu Xing respectively. After Niu learned that this character was her name, she stared at the big characters without blinking, wishing she could learn how to write it now. Gu Mingde did not treat one favorably and gave Niu a branch and a sand table to practice calligraphy on the sand table. Gu Dia's eyes grew hot when she saw it, and she turned to Chen Chanhua and said, "Mom, I also want to learn to read. Why should only the eldest and second brothers learn to read and not me?" Chen Chanhua slapped her on the forehead and lectured, "Why are you a little girl learning to read? Do you have a sand table? Have you finished the clothes I asked you to sew?" On the other hand, Gu Yun, the eldest brother, maybe out of brother-sister affection, maybe because he really didn't want to learn such complicated characters, shouted anxiously, "Mom, I have a sand table, I will lend it to my sister. Let my sister learn how to read, I don't learn." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 9. Originally, Gu Yun only had to be beaten by his father, but after this was said, it immediately became a mixed doubles match between men and women. Chen Chunyua picked up the broom beside her and hit Guyun. You are useless even if I give you a chance. I really raised you in vain. You know how to be lazy all day long and can't even learn to enjoy life. Guyun was the most stubborn person in his body. Even at this time, he still didn't forget to talk back. Mom, this blessing is given to you, do you want it? Chen Chunyua was so angry that her nose was about to be crooked. Not only did Guyun not cherish it, but he also stuffed the branch into his sister's hand. You learn, and you will learn from now on. Learn all the words that big brother doesn't want to recognize, Guyun said and was about to run. But he was only 14 years old after all, and was no match for his father, Guleada. He ran a few steps before he was picked up and pressed to kneel in front of the sand table. Gu Mingda certainly understood the thoughts of Guleada and his wife. It was a good thing for his son to learn a few more words for free. Even though his two nephews were obviously not good enough for the imperial examination, Gu Mingda never refused. Instead, he deliberately made 2 sets of teaching plans for them. Even if his 2 nieces also learned to read, Gu Mingda would probably not refuse. Unfortunately, Guleada and his wife were obviously unwilling to waste so much time on their daughters. Gu Dia had just got a nice name, and was pulled back to her room by her mother to sew clothes. Chen Chunyua kept muttering, girls will go to other people's homes sooner or later. Instead of wasting time on learning to read, it's better to learn a few more dishes so that you can be liked by your mother-in-law when you go to her husband's house in the future. Before leaving, Gu Dia glanced at Nayuniu and couldn't help complaining, why am I not the daughter of my second uncle? Even his adopted daughter has the opportunity to learn to read. Hearing this, Chen Chunyua's anger rose up and she couldn't help but slapped her on the spot. Gu Dia looked at Chen Chunyua with disbelief in her eyes. In fact, Chen Chunyua regretted it right after the beating. Although she valued her son, she also felt sorry for her daughter. She had never beaten Dia before. Chen Chunyua was still stubborn and scolded, you are really rebellious. I gave birth to you with great difficulty, but I made a mistake. If you really want to be someone's daughter, then go ahead and see if they want you. Gu Dia was beaten in front of everyone. She felt extremely embarrassed at this time. She didn't mention reading and literacy anymore. She covered her face and cried and ran into the woodshed next to her, and closed the dilapidated door of the woodshed with force. Guyun was about to say something when Chen Chunyua scolded him, go learn your handwriting. If it weren't for you, there wouldn't be so many troubles. Guyun shrank his neck in fear. He knew that his mother was in a rage again. She would kick any dog that passed by and scold anyone who provoked her. He could only swallow what he wanted to say and honestly trace the word 11 on the sand table with a pen. Nayuniu looked at the closed firewood room door, turned around, and also imitated Guyun to write on the sand table. But she was small and short, and the posture of holding the branch looked weird. Hold the branch like this. Guyan approached Nayuniu at some point, stretched out his hand, and demonstrated to Nayuniu. Although he was not very old, his fingers were slender and white. The sun fell on him, giving him a golden halo. Nayuniu stretched out her little hand and tried to imitate Guyan's pen-holding posture, but she could never learn the essence. Guyan looked at the little girl's slightly clumsy appearance, chuckled, and covered her little hand with his right hand to help her hold the branch. He quickly wrote 2 words on the sand table in front of him, Gu 11. This is your name, Gu 11, Guyan explained. Nayuniu looked at the 2 words carefully for several times, muttering them softly, as if she wanted to deeply engrave the 2 words in her mind. Gu Mingda did not just start teaching the children to read and write. In fact, everyone in the family had a different progress. After teaching a few common characters, he began to teach the 4 books and 5 classics. This time, his student was actually only Guyan. This kind of threshold course was incomprehensible to others. Guyun and Gujin's eyes began to circle, and their attention could not help but fall to other places. On the contrary, Na Yuniu, although she did not understand the later courses, still looked extremely serious, looking at Gu Mingde with a pair of big eyes. After finally finishing the afternoon teaching, Gu Yun and Gu Jin immediately cheered and ran out of the yard as if escaping. Gu Yan had many questions in his mind, so he grabbed Gu Mingde and asked him questions. Zhang Yuniang had 3 sons. The eldest, Gu Yan, was 13 years old this year. He studied very hard. If he hadn't been in poor health, he would have been able to take the Tongsheng exam long ago. The second, Gu Xian, was 11 years old this year, but unfortunately he was abducted and sold very early and his whereabouts are still unknown. The third, Gu Zhao, was 6 years old this year, only 1 year older than Niu Niu. His learning progress was similar to Niu Niu's. Gu Zhao was not as studious as his brother. At this time, he came to Niu Niu and said like offering a treasure, "Niu Niu, look, what is this?" He opened his palm, and inside was a green caterpillar. Niu Niu was almost scared to tears when she saw this scene. She was most afraid of insects. This kind of soft-bodied creature, although small in size, makes people want to be petrified at the sight of it. I caught this with great difficulty. I have kept it for several days. Isn't it very beautiful? The 6-year-old Gu Zhao asked proudly. Niu Niu didn't know how to answer, she just wanted to stay away from the thing. He even put his hand in front of Niu Niu and said, "Mom said you will be my sister in the future. I can't bear to play with ordinary people. I'll give it to you." Gu Zhao wanted to give it as a gift to his new sister, but he felt reluctant when he said it, so he changed his words and said, "I agree that you can touch it. Come on, see if it likes you." Although Niu Niu was very afraid of the bug, she trembled and stretched out her hand under Gu Zhao's repeated urging. "Ouch, it hurts." Gu Zhao tilted his head and cried out. When he saw Zhang Yuniang pinching his ear, he begged for mercy, "Mom, please be gentle. Be gentle." Zhang Yuniang raised her eyebrows and said, "You little bastard, you are scaring people with caterpillars again, let me see how I will deal with you." Gu Zhao explained, "This is not scary, this is my baby, I am good to my sister, so I let her touch it." Zhang Yuniang glared at her youngest son, but she didn't pull his ear too hard. Instead, she hugged Na Yuniu, who was standing there stupidly, and asked, "Na Yuniu, are you afraid? Your third brother dared to bully you, I will punish him in a while." When Gu Zhao heard this, he was so anxious that he winked at Na Yuniu. Na Yuniu looked up at Zhang Yuniang and said seriously, "Mom, the third brother didn't bully me, he just wanted to play with me." Although playing with insects is very scary and difficult for ordinary people to accept, Na Yuniu can feel that Gu Zhao has no ill intentions. Seeing that Na Yuniu really thought so, Zhang Yuniang did not hold on to the matter anymore, but just told Gu Zhao, "Play with the bugs by yourself, but don't bring your sister into the pit. There is a lot of work for the country people, and Zhang Yuniang can't keep watching the children all the time." After Gu Zhao escaped from the clutches of his mother, he said to Na Yuniu very loyally, "You helped me this time, I will give you this bug." Na Yuniu didn't dare to take it, she waved her hand quickly. After Gu Zhao was sure that she really didn't want it, he took the precious bug away with great care. Friendship between children is always established quickly. Gu Zhao already regarded his new sister as a good friend in his heart. Seeing that Na Yuniu seemed unhappy, he asked, "Are you hungry?" In the mind of Gu Zhao, being hungry and his mother not letting him play with bugs are the only two sad things in the world. Na Yuniu shook her head and whispered, "Third brother, do you know how to make a sand table?" After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 10. Studying costs money. In addition to the annual tuition, which is a considerable expense, the price of pens, ink, paper, and inkstone is also very high, which is not something that ordinary families can afford. In the end, the Gu family has only supported Gu Mingde, a scholar, in these years. Although the eldest and third sons of Gu were sent to school, they gave up at the elementary stage and did not spend money. When it comes to the grandchildren, they will be taught by Gu Mingde, a student, and there is no need to spend tuition at all. Even learning to write is practiced on a sand table, which is even less expensive. Among the grandchildren, only Gu Yan has really practiced writing on paper, and he still spent Gu Mingde's money. In the end, the only cost of studying and learning to read in the Gu family is such a sand table. The sand table of the Gu family has a wooden base, which is made into a low drawer, with a thick layer of sand spread inside. After writing a word with a branch, the sand can be spread flat at will. Gu Mingde assigned homework every time, and how many times to practice calligraphy. In fact, there is no way to verify whether it is lazy or not, everything depends on self-consciousness. At this time, Gu Zhao heard Niu Niu's question, tilted his head, and asked, "Why are you asking this? Do you want to make one?" Niu Niu nodded and looked at the firewood room beside her. At this time, she could still hear faint crying coming from inside. Gu Zhao glanced at his sand table and said, "I don't know, but it looks quite simple. Just add some sand on a board." "Where can we get a board?" Gu Zhao didn't even ask Niu Niu why she wanted to make a sand table. He had already racked his brains to help. His eyes fell on the door of the firewood room and said, "Let's take down this door." Niu Niu was frightened, but she didn't have time to stop it. Gu Zhao had already started to act, rushing over like a small cannonball to remove the door. Gu Dia, who was hiding inside and crying quietly, thought she was abandoned by the whole world, and had a miserable look on her face, cried, and found that a beam of light hit her. Gu Dia squinted her eyes and looked over, only to find that the firewood room had no door. She hid here because she didn't want to be seen crying. Now that there was no door, people outside could see clearly how miserable she was. Gu Dia didn't know whether she should continue crying. Gu Zhao had already shouted at her, "Sister Dia, come and help, this door is too heavy, I can't hold it." Gu Dia hesitated for only 2 seconds, then she came forward with a twisted face, helped him hold the door, and didn't forget to remind him, "I wasn't crying just now, don't think too much." Gu Zhao was a brainless person, and was easily fooled, saying, "Oh, were you singing in there just now?" It was a bit unpleasant. Gu Dia's fists hardened instantly, and she didn't know if the stinky cousin was being sarcastic, and she didn't even want to help him hold the door. Niu Niu also came forward to help, and the three of them lifted the door to the side and put it down. "Zhao, why are you tearing down the door? Aren't you afraid that our grandma will beat you?" Gu Dia asked. Gu Zhao said, "My sister said she wanted to make a sand table." Gu Dia paused after hearing this, looked at Niu Niu beside her, and asked softly, "Why are you making a sand table?" Niu Niu whispered, "Sister Dia, if you and Sister Xiao have a sand table, you can learn characters with us." Gu Dia's heart softened after hearing this. She originally believed what Chen Chunyua said and didn't like the sister who suddenly joined. Niu Niu was so good to her. She was the first person in the family to take the initiative to help her solve the problem. Now Gu Dia's heart was full of shame. Niu Niu said a little embarrassedly, "Sister Dia, I should have given you my sand table, but this is the first gift my father gave me. I'm sorry, I can't bear to give it away." As the oldest girl in the family, Gu Dia still has the demeanor of an elder sister when she doesn't go against her mother. She immediately said, "If it were mine, I would keep it too." Niu Niu was relieved immediately after hearing this. Gu Zhao, however, was obviously getting impatient while waiting for the two to talk. He kicked the door he had taken down and asked, "Shall I find an axe and split this thing?" Gu Dia hurriedly stopped him and said, "No, if we really split it, Grandma will definitely scold us. But if you don't split it, you won't have a sandbox," Gu Zhao said with a simple face, touching the back of his head. The movement here had long attracted the attention of Gu Mingda and Gu Yan. Gu Mingda didn't intend to care about the children's affairs. Seeing Gu Yan's concerned look, he said, "Go and see what they are doing." After saying this, Gu Mingda went back to the house. In the house, Zhang Yuniang was sewing a small gray dress. "For Niuniu?" Gu Mingda asked softly. Zhang Yuniang said, "It's definitely too late to buy cloth to make clothes for her now. The eldest sister-in-law and the third brother's wife will also gossip. I will make the third sister's clothes smaller for her to wear. It's a pity that she has been in the Zhang family for so many years, let alone new clothes, and she hasn't even worn a slightly clean old clothes. The clothes Niuniu is wearing now are also old clothes that others don't want, and they are full of patches." Gu Mingda took out a purse, divided the money into two piles, and gave them all to his wife. Zhang Yuniang also knew that part of this pile of money would be handed over to old lady Gu by her, and the other part would be kept for private use. Gu Mingda is different from other men. He doesn't have the bad habits of eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling. Instead, he has many ways to make money. Every time he gets money, except for a sum of money left for emergencies, he gives it all to her. Zhang Yuniang used to worry about whether her husband, who was gentle, considerate, and handsome, would face temptation outside. Since all the money in the family was given to her, her heart was settled. "Since Niuniu has come to our house, we must pamper her like our own daughter. We can't let her down. Tomorrow we will go to the county together to buy some cloth for Niuniu to make clothes. Don't worry about the gossips of the first and third wives," Gu Mingda said. Zhang Yuniang was stunned when she heard this. In fact, she has always been very uneasy. She brought Niuniu back to the Gu family without discussing it with her husband in advance. There was a little girl who was not related to her by blood in the family. If it was another man, he would have jumped up long ago. Gu Mingda seemed to know what she was thinking. He looked through the window into the yard and said to Zhang Yuniang gently, "I have always hoped to have a cute little daughter, but we gave birth to 3 bad boys in succession. Now I have finally got what I wanted." Zhang Yuniang felt bitter in her heart. Her husband always tolerated her like this. No matter what she did, she would get his support. Gu Yan in the yard already knew what good things his brothers and sisters were going to do. He smiled and said, "I don't think it's a big deal. Isn't it just a sand table?" The 3 little ones turned their heads instantly and stared at him with bright eyes. Gu Yan said, "The sand table is used to hold sand. Wood is fine, and other things are also fine." After Gu Yan put the door of the firewood room back, he took a group of brothers and sisters to the reed marsh. Now it was autumn and the weather was cool, and the reeds were all withered and yellow. Everyone immediately understood that they were going to use reeds to weave a frame to hold sand and use it as a sand table for Da Yat and Xiao Yat. "Brother, but we don't know how to weave," Niu Niu said in a low voice. Gu Yan, as the person who is most like Gu Mingda in this family, showed his cleverness far beyond that of ordinary children and said, "Grandpa can weave. I saw him weave before. Let him teach us. Countryside children are tough and don't have much safety awareness." A group of little radish heads started to dig in the reed marsh. Thanks to the dry weather today, the ground of the reed marsh has long been dry, and there is no swamp that can trap people. Niuniu is small and struggles to find those reeds that are easier to pull down. It seems that whatever she wants comes true. She can pull the reeds that are usually deeply rooted in the soil. She pulls deeper and deeper. Gradually, she can't even hear the sound of her brothers and sisters fighting. The surroundings are deadly quiet, even without the sound of the wind. Niuniu finally knows how to be afraid. The reeds on the left suddenly moved, and Niuniu stepped back in fear, her feet twisted, and she sat on the ground. Just as she was about to get up, she suddenly saw a round thing on her right hand. Turning his head, he saw only 7 or 8 round white duck eggs covered with brown spots. A silly head popped out from the reeds where the noise was heard earlier. Nayuniu, why are you here? We've been looking for you everywhere. Nayuniu moved her body, revealing the 7 or 8 wild duck eggs behind her. Gu Zhao looked at these wild duck eggs and drooled all over the floor. Wild duck eggs. We'll have scrambled eggs tonight.